So my name's Sharon Gill. I'm the CEO of YVAN. Next on my screen is Sarah.
Hi, I'm Sarah. I'm the administrator from YVAN.
Then I have Peter.
Hi, I'm Peter. I'm an artist, but also a participation manager at Site Gallery.
Nice to meet you. Welcome. Lydia.
Hi, I'm creative producer for IOU. We're based in Clough in Colesdale.
Oh, nice to meet you. Welcome. Les.
Hi, I'm Les. I'm an artist. I'm a photographer, and I work mainly in Donny in South Yorkshire.
Oh,
and I'm sorry, I'm going to have to leave to talk to a student in half an hour,
Okay.
but I will try and come back.
Thank you. And Mel.
Hi, I'm Mel. I'm based in Leeds. I'm an artist and a researcher. I'm currently doing a PhD about artist practice after the pandemic and in the face of challenges like this. I'm also working with YVAN on some of that research. So yeah, also just to let you know, my connection is quite bad, so that's why I'm going to try and keep my video off. And I might have to duck out in about an hour or so to take a call. So yeah, don't let me interrupt. But yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Mel. Right. So if Sarah, if you could share screen again with the presentation, that'd be lovely. Okay, next slide, please. So it's a little bit of background data. Realize my little photos cover up the screen, don't they? So this is a bit of data I did some digging with just to put some context on what we're looking at. So the current population, according to the census, is around 68, nearly 69 million. And at the last counting of occupational coding, there were 45,500 artists. It was actually a decrease from 2019. So that kind of indicates people leaving the sector, and we don't know why. So that's something else that we would like to get to the bottom of a little bit. Now, in terms of the occupational codes that are used for tax purposes, this is the one that I am reporting against, which is artists, artist, illustrator, portrait painter, sculptor. As I'm sure you're aware, these occupation codes are insufficient, and that's something that I know YVAN are looking at in their policy document. So if we look at that number of 45,500 artists within a sort of 68,700,000 people, you're looking at 0.067% of the population in the UK are artists. If you take, there's approximately 5.5 million people in the Yorkshire and Humber region and apply that, then we have nearly 3,700 artists living in our region. I did also do the calculation for arts managers and producers, which is slightly higher, but of course that's across multiple disciplines, not just more visual arts. Next slide, please. Please feel free to interrupt and ask questions as we go. I've included in here a briefing note that came through in September from What Next, which I'm sure is an organisation everyone's familiar with. This is obviously before the autumn statement and probably even before Liz Truss exited the political arena. But this is just to give you some of the context of the reason we're having this meeting, really. There's energy bills that are going to put loads of people out of business, loads of venues, cultural venues. Could you go back a bit, please, Sarah? A bit fast. You know, and there's people not being able to access studios and rehearsal rooms. This impacts people with lived experience, as every discriminating barrier does. So that the impact on the workforce is again going to be challenging. Making things, just accessing things. You've got Brexit stopping the flow of goods and materials and skills and talent and artworks as well. Next screen, please. And it's not just us, it's not just the arts and culture that are being impacted by this, although, as we've seen through the last MPO round, if you were lucky to receive anything, it was at standstill, which is effectively a cut in the current climate. With a 10% inflation, standing still isn't really very helpful. And only 8% of the region's MPO allocation went to the visual arts. The majority of it went to music, and the largest slice, 25%, went to Opera North, in fact, in our region. So there is a case to make about investing, supporting, and how to make sure that the arts aren't squashed and neglected in what is equally significant in terms of health, workers' rights. Everyone's on strike. It's just, how do we navigate all this and make a case? Next slide, please. And then, of course, there's people with burnout. So there's people like us who are at the coalface, trying to make a difference. And, there's only so many times you can bash your head against that brick wall that doesn't move. Okay, next slide, please. There's a bit about what's next there in case you didn't know about them. I referred earlier to a policy document from YVAN that came out in October. This is the section, these are recommendations to go to the all-party parliamentary group. And this is through consultation across the whole country between all the regional networks. This is what's been summarised as the best way the government can do very precise and focused support for the sector, particularly for building-based organisations, which are perhaps the least flexible and are going to suffer the most. Okay, next slide, please, Sarah. So then we come to the 3 provocations that I have. Does anybody want to add anything at this point is there any inaccuracies, or have I missed anything up to this point that you think we should be putting on the table? No, okay. So I'm kind of hoping this will be a co-created event. It's not just about me asking questions, so please feel free to chip in at any time. So my first provocation really, and wanting to collect some evidence and data that we can reliably take forward and deliver as a voice of the sector, was to how do we collate information about the impact the current economic crisis is having on people's practice and their ability to continue their practice. So yeah, I'd like to open up the floor. Because I haven't got the answers. Is anyone aware that people have, for instance, vacated their studios, or that they've changed their artistic practice as a result of what's occurring?
I know some of the bigger theatres have heard whispers that some are really going to struggle if things are continuing the way they are and the projections are coming out how people are expecting. So certainly for the bigger theatres, I've heard not necessarily known individual practitioners. I think for myself, I'm a theatre maker as well. What I like about making solo work is that you can, your bedroom can be a studio at times. So I'm sure there's elements of artists who have a solo practice that are used to working in that way and will continue to work in that way. But that might be a change for some people. Yeah, if they can't be affording studio space anymore.
But also there's the lack of opportunity to find other work that supports your practice, Is that people having that difficult, being a freelancer in the sector in itself? I think is a bit of a challenge currently. You know, the rates of pay aren't there, you know, same within our organisation itself. You know, it's a massive challenge to deliver what is an ambitious programme with, you know, dwindling resource. So how is that being, you know, how are people managing that?
I'd say lots of people are picking up more bits of freelance or temporary work that is maybe not necessarily connected to your art practice. So the impact on art practice is there's less time you can spend on it because you have to spend more time earning money. That's kind of one thing that I've seen. Another thing that kind of comes to mind is just the energy bills of studios and studio rent going up, which is then hard to justify to studio holders who there's not any kind of, you know, if you're paying more money towards just covering your overheads, you're not putting more money into improving the infrastructure within studios. So then it's like very hard to say, you know, we need you to pay more money. And they're like, yeah, but for what? And then that in turn also means that, for example, in our studios, we've always been very conscious of not having the heating on too much. But now it's like very much to a point where it's like we daren't turn the heating on because everybody feels that impact so directly in their studio rent. So then there's like certain bits of work, if you're doing, say, desk-based work or something, lots of people just won't do that kind of work in the studio. You just do it at home because it's too cold. So then there's like that loss of community or use of the studio, and then that impacts on people even wanting to be there if they're wanting a studio for those reasons. So there's kind of a couple of things there, if that's helpful.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. I guess I've got a studio in Clough in Sheffield, which is a small DIY artist-led space, and it's a similar situation with, you know, I would have previously done desk work in my studio, but it's just too cold. So I'll either stay and work at site and do bits there, or I'll do it at home. It's just, yeah, like reading and things like that, and that part of my practice I just can't do. But then things like when I'm prepping materials for like a workshop or a project, I have to do that in person. I can't do the messy stuff at home. And then also, like, I think my decision to have a studio as well is partly based on what I'm investing in as well. So I really like what they do locally in terms of constant turnaround of shows, and I can see really clearly where the money is going. I used to have a studio in S1 for a long time, and I couldn't really see where the money was going as clearly. It just kind of felt like it was just confusing with the whole situation with Urban Splash and everything. But like, so like part of my decision to have a studio is also investing in where I have my studio, if that makes sense.
No, I think that's really key. And are you aware of any plans? You know, are they insulating? Have they got any kind of environmental eco stuff going on?
No, the space is really there's no the studio rent covers the overheads. It's run by voluntary directors, and then they survive on like a £20,000 a year project grant, which is my understanding of the model. So it sustains itself, but it can never.
It's not going to grow.
It's not going to grow, which means that the studios are, you know, affordable. But then, if you never go in, they're quite expensive.
It makes you wonder about the sustainability of that. I mean, Gloam isn't a meanwhile space either, is it?
No.
You know, they're leaseholders, I imagine. But you know, there's an issue with temporary space as well, isn't there? I know some organisations, their financial model is based on meanwhile spaces being available, but if they're too cold to be in, you know, no one's going to want to work there, are they?
No.
I mean, actually, my old office when I had a job was too cold to work in. Sometimes I used to have to go home. And a community centre I worked in was too cold as well. So it's just old buildings, I think. So how is the site gallery managing? Are they being a warm space?
In terms of what we're doing for artists?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we've opened a community editing space, which is a bank of like 3 iMacs that people can book out and use for as long as they want when we're open.
Right.
And it's currently used maybe like 3 times a week, but you know, it could be used more. I would like it if it was used more.
Is there a charge on that, like an hourly charge?
No, it's free.
It's free.
So it's like great computers, brand new, fully equipped with all Adobe stuff, and people can use them in. It's a slow burner, but as soon as people get in, then they start. It's hard to build something new into your practice, but there's a few artists who have, and then it's yeah, they start to use it more and more regularly, which keeps a flow. So yeah, so that'll be running for at least the next year. I don't know whether we can afford to not use that office forever, but for now we do that. And then we also have our network for young kind of artists, like teenagers, every week, which is different, but it's the next.
The building itself is quite new, though, isn't it? Is it environmentally, is it cost effective to heat, I guess?
Yes, kind of.
Yeah.
I think it gets power from I think it gets heat from the incinerator. You know, that thing.
The district heating.
Yeah. Okay. But you know, it's still the air control and temperature controls on artwork are really hard to maintain.
Yeah.
You know, if you borrow things from collections and it says you have to maintain a certain heat or whatever, that costs a fortune. And I know there's been some campaigning to relax some of those guidelines on work, but yeah, the main challenge.
Yeah. How's life in? Did you say you're in Halifax, Lydia?
Can I just interrupt, Sharon? I think Les has got his hand up.
Oh, beg your pardon, Les.
It's all right. It's just I have to go in like 4 minutes.
Yeah.
I can't really be late. Just a couple of things. I mean, like, so I have to do, you know, the work from home stuff means like, you know, as much as you just look, I'm having to do this in the bedroom because it's one place. Like the garage is freezing now, so I can't like work out there. Really basic stuff like so Northern Rail have cut loads of and not brought back trains, so I'm having to use the car. That's actually now money. You start to see that and you're thinking, I can't just swallow this in an overarching day fee here. I'm gonna have to start thinking about what they're gonna have to pay towards, you know, because I've been working out in Stainforth, which is 15 miles from here, so that's 30 miles, and so suddenly that's some money now, as opposed to just being some pounds that you could swallow up in your fee or whatever. But I've been working for ages now with not ages, trying to work for ages and just finally getting in for the last couple of years directly with sort of public health and things like that, because I get so little from, I've only ever had one Arts Council grant, and like get so little from anywhere else, and the effort and it's not worth it if you can realistically cut out the middleman who's just administrating, to be blunt. You know, my thing, and also adding another voice that gets in the way of what the commissioners might actually genuinely want, if it's commissioners or whatever. So what I would be worried about is just the very slow collapse of that as we get in recessions. We see this, don't we? We'd like you know, the financial crash one, I had worked for a year after that where places had like money to spend on things. Well, none of those kinds of projects where, what say Bolton at Home used to run 1% of their turnover for art. I mean, they still keep some money, but like that idea, like that could have gone to every housing association in the country and councils could have took that up. Nope, none of that's coming back. The worry for me is that even like public health would not find a way. I mean, just briefly, my project that I've just done with them is they're like, the way you work, that gets the people that we can't get either. It's like, yeah. So I can actually be used for practical things. It's not just an aesthetic illustration of their work. I found people and found voices and amplified that, and we use that. And you just wonder, everybody's mind's going to be on bean counting. That they're never even going to be able to justify that, even if you get results that are beyond art for them.
Yeah.
And my worry is that even they're always trimming what they would call fat, aren't they, and where the fat. So
there's a value system issue, isn't there? It's like,
we'll always
it's the way you report the spend that's the problem. Yeah. And even when you make something of value, you know, well, you make a beautiful little sort of book for them. You know, it's fabulous. You know, it's still like they then just see that as a standard thing. You know, oh, right, oh, so okay, if we employ you for a little bit, you'll come back with a book. It's like, oh my God, no. That's a lot of money. Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But yeah, it is about seeing the value in it and seeing the value in us, isn't it? Of course, and as always, just trying to reach the people, like I say. I mean, it's not just because I'm a grumpy person with a chip on my shoulder that I don't necessarily get work with the Arts Council or whatever, but it's just like, in the end, it's just like the blocks of work need to be vital. You know, it was mentioned earlier, wasn't it, about having to just make some money first.
Yeah. The
designer helped me with that, bless him. He is like struggling all the time.
Yeah.
He's probably spending 2 days a week trying to get work.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like we're already on UC, isn't it? You know what I mean? So right, I'm at 13:30. Sorry, I'm gonna have to go. I'll try and come back later.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sorry, Lydia, go back to you over in Halifax, aren't you? In Dean Clough, did you say?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a massive, sprawling building.
It is, and it's very, very cold in winter. I mean, we basically shut off our studios to artists in the winter, because historically it's been cold prior to cost of living and everything. And just as a workspace as well, we've got a communal workspace, and I think we were sort of having conversations about, oh, you know, it's going to cost a lot to heat, but ultimately, if it's not somewhere we can work, it's not viable. And we were sort of saying, well, ultimately, heating one space for us all to come to is better than each individual heating their, you know, own homes and working from home. But then I know there's like what Les was saying in terms of costs. Petrol costs as well. Some of us come a little bit further afield. So yeah, it's just
always
weighing
lunch
all
as
that
well.
up.
You always end up spending more on cups of tea and lunch if you're not at home.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. I've just bought lunch today, and I think that it's the changing weather as well. Like at the minute, I'm really going. I'm always sort of bring my own stuff in. I'm really good with that, but equally it's winter, like during the day I just need something warm actually to just keep me going. So I think I've always been a bit of a stickler for making my own things and bringing it in, but I've been a little bit more lenient with, do you know what, I'm actually just going to buy a nice warm cooked meal because I'm rubbish for making it at home as well. So and then I'll cook with whatever when I get back. So it's just weighing it all up, I think. But yeah, like I say, we sort of made the decision that to heat one space was better than individuals heating several.
So if you were already shutting the studios down for winter, so that's a loss of income for your organisation and maintenance model anyway. So what has there been further impacts? Have you lost businesses? Because I know half of it's kind of business, isn't it? Commercially let?
No, I mean, we've got our hostel, that's our commercial side of things, but the studio itself, that's all NPO and charity. So it's not, well, yeah, it's just something that we've historically done, so it's not affected us and it's not going to affect us this time. Because all the work we do with artists, we give, it's all in kind anyway, so they're not paying fees to come and be in the space.
Okay. And there's no plans, I mean, there's no plans to kind of like have solar panels or heat ground heat pumps or solid fuel generators?
No, none of that. Our manager that's in charge of the sustainability element of the company, I think he said in the other meeting the other day, said, we're really good. So if we could just maybe turn the lights off in the kitchen when we're not in the kitchen, that'd be great. And that was like the one thing. So because it's a sustainable organisation anyway, we're always sort of trying, I guess maybe the only thing we might see is that we really like to support independent and buy, not from the big companies where possible. But in terms of costings, that might be something we might have to sacrifice moving forward.
Yeah.
So sort of the ethical standpoint versus the cost.
That's really interesting that you already were shutting. So your financial model is already accommodating a bleak winter, if you like.
Yeah. Only for the artists, not us. We're still in, it's just the artists. But because our studio space is literally the mill and there's a couple of heaters on the wall, but it's freezing. I know when I come, we think the office is cold sometimes, and then you go downstairs and you think, oh my God, I'll never complain because this is just crazy. And I'm sure there's times where you're outside and it's warmer than actually being in the mill studio. So yeah, it's not closed in terms of the work we do. That continues. I think maybe we just shut down for a week at Christmas, but yeah, it's not open to artists because of those. It's not a viable workspace.
Yeah, interesting.
I think it's a good point that Lydia's raised, though, in that this isn't a new kind of issue with like heating and artist studios. It's pretty historic and based on that kind of model of occupying kind of industrial spaces, or like just the cheap spaces, or like any space that you can get, and then not having enough money to invest in those because you either don't have permission, you don't own the building, you don't have the turnover, blah blah blah. But yeah, I don't think it's not anything new. Like, it's quite common for artist studios to go into a kind of dormant state over winter when people aren't using them as much. I think it's just within this particular context that feels more acute, or the attention is focused on it more. But it isn't anything new, I don't think.
So Lydia, you don't have environment controls on exhibition spaces like the site gallery have to contend with then?
What do you mean by that?
Well, if you're sort of accepting touring collections to exhibit, some works require specific environmental controls and temperatures and humidity levels. You don't apply that. You've got gallery space, haven't you?
We do have a gallery space, yeah. To my knowledge, we've not had anything that's needed those sort of controls. It tends to be just your static installations that can be housed. There might be a sound, quite often sound or light element to that. So I guess there's costings associated with that and setting that up. But
they're not heated.
No. That was in a walkway, shared walkway with the mill.
Okay, interesting. Welcome, Glynis. Welcome, Rachel. We're just on our first provocation, really, which is about the impact of the economic situation on artistic practice. So we've just been discussing a little bit about buildings and the impact of having a studio space. I think Glynis is sat at home with a woolly hat on, staying nice and warm.
I know.
That's what I'd be doing if I was at home.
Well, I'm not warm because I live in an old Victorian house and I have got the heating on actually, but it doesn't really make much difference because it's so drafty, and I think everywhere needs retrofitting now. I mean, I don't know what the government's doing about householders or businesses. I mean, there's also the electric vehicle sort of thing where, you know, but electric vehicles are still so expensive. I like the idea of the collective space, you know, where you can warm one space. And I think that's what they tell you at home, to warm, you know, to keep one room warm where you can work in. This is my biggest room. This is my living room, because actually I had to leave the studio at Shawthorne House and bring all the stuff here. So I'm sort of, and I'm wearing all this because, you know, yeah, I'm cold basically. So it's a big problem, but you know, I think in a sense, yeah, because everywhere, I remember turning down a space in Leeds in a mill because it was too cold, basically. And I just thought, I can't have a studio in a mill because I just can't stand there not being no heating. And it's really, when you look at the old buildings, I think we maybe have to move away from, we have to look at more sustainable, smaller buildings to work in and that are purpose built, you know, in the future, and maybe work with architects, because architects are still artists in a sense. And it's like, what are architects doing about pushing for more sustainable spaces within their profession and within artists?
There's possibly mixed use, isn't there? They talk about live work spaces now. I know S1 in particular, weren't they, their urban splash, that was very much this kind of live work situation where you use the same space. Do you want to talk, do you know much about that, Peter, or is that
I don't think it really came to be. They wanted to build a whole wall in one of the empty wings of one of the flats. But I think the relationship with Urban Splash became a bit fractured because that wasn't being developed as quickly as possible. And then like renovations within the studios were never really done with much haste. So like all my stuff had like a coating of mold on. And I was like, just got to the point where I was like, I don't want to be breathing this in anymore, you know.
Yeah. Which is an interesting issue about health actually with some of these spaces, isn't there? That kind of your physical and mental health. You know, if you're shutting a studio down for the whole of winter for very practical reasons, but you're a creative person, you know, how do you realign that activity? I know if I'm not making stuff, I get very grumpy, and that's on a very basic level. So
yeah, I think the peer network is the more important to me than the space.
Yeah,
I think it's about, in some ways, it's about finding different things to do. As well, I'm looking at you know, different ways of earning money rather than, you know, having to have a space where you make stuff, or being very specific about planning what you're going to do and then finding a space to do it in as a short-term thing rather than having a continuous space. I've always found it a bit difficult having a continuous space because sometimes I'm not there, and I've tended to make things at home more than use the studio, because it's easy, you know, because sometimes it is warmer to be at home and to have all your stuff around you rather than have to travel to an outside space. And especially now, because here the buses keep going on strike, the trains are going on strike, so it is very much you have to find a way to work where you are or near where you live. And I am looking at more online sort of stuff, so I'm changing what, and I can do a lot of different things, so it's a bit like, what could I do now that would make me money, that wouldn't cost too much to actually, for me to actually do it. And it might be, we have to look at different ways, you know. I mean, I was even looking at cleaning jobs today on the Hull City Council website, and then again it's like, where are they? Are they where I can actually get to by bike or walking? So it's all those sorts of things. And
I think it's interesting, that idea of sharing spaces. So you know, having a private studio is fabulous, but maybe there is scope for a bit like Airbnb, rent your studio out for a week or two, or an evening a week or something.
Like Peter's the site gallery space, you know, I mean, if that was publicized a bit more, maybe targeting people, or just advertise to say, like, do something different, you know, do work in a warm space on and do more online stuff. So do, you know, get that done, do your marketing, do your, you know, because it could be an opportunity to do other things that are connected to your art practice, rather than, you know, getting your fingers frozen off trying to paint the picture in a freezing cold studio. I mean, I've got gloves. I use gardening gloves actually sometimes to paint with, you know, and you know, and all the clothes on, hats, gloves, whatever.
Rachel, not heard from you. Do you want to just, sorry, Glynis as well. Do you want to just very briefly introduce yourself? Because we did a little round earlier on. So Rachel, if you want to go. Hi.
Yeah, I'm assistant producer with Lydia at IOU. I thought I'd jump on the call just to see what everybody's thoughts were about obviously the kind of the next year that we're going into. You're talking about insulation, like, you know, with heating up areas. I'm an artist as well, and I have my own space. It's in an old mill building, and it's freezing from about end of November right through to even March. And so I find that I've having to accommodate personally to try and use my home as much as possible during those months. So it's like, you know, planning for when I can use the workshop or not. But I was actually just researching to see if there's any like grant schemes for insulation, because everybody's all about insulating homes, and there's grant schemes for people who are homeowners that can have, I think, up to £1,000, 1,500 in loft conversion, but not so much for businesses. Businesses have a different grant scheme, but again, you have to own that space. So I was just in the middle of having a wee look.
Yeah. Lovely. Well, thank you for joining us. Glynis, do you want to just quickly introduce yourself to everybody?
Hi, I'm Glynis Neslen. I'm an artist. I also have done some curating as well. I'm a member of YVAN's research group, and sometimes I get to the equal opportunities group as well. But I've done, my main thing was I trained in photography, but I do painting and ceramics and music as well. I've got more into music actually recently as well. So I'm looking for musical rehearsal spaces, and actually usually musical rehearsal spaces are usually warmer because of the instruments, you know, and things like that. So
is that to do with sound dampening as well? They're always carpeted, aren't they?
Yeah, and so I'm looking at a space that is in town actually. So basically that's me, and I was part of one of the BTO2 production, which was to promote Black artists in the region. That's me.
Lovely, thank you, Glynis. I wonder, Sarah, if we might go on to the second provocation, and we probably don't need to share screen if I can find it on my own. So my second thought in this sort of journey of impact was about the kinds of support networks that people already access, and perhaps support that would be of benefit. I think, Peter, you mentioned actually the peer network was more significant to you than the space, for example. So maybe if we could have a little bit of a discussion around where people are actually turning for help, you know, if we're looking for spaces, or, you know, the site gallery are offering support, you know, how do people actually access that? How simple is it? Obviously, networks is something that we're particularly keen in gaining a much bigger understanding about, because we think networks are the best way to disseminate anything, really. It just has this kind of massive expansion maths to it. Maybe we've lost, maybe Lydia, let's go back to Lydia. What kind of, where would you go for support, and maybe what kind of support do you offer?
That's a good question. Well, in terms of support that we offer, there's a lot that we're doing for artists in which that they can be using space or have advice from the team. So in a time where everything costs so much, we're offering the opportunity for artists to access that free of charge. So that's what we're offering others. In terms of where we might go to access support, it would just be different avenues of funding. I think it's obviously all money focused, and yeah, despite getting our MPR from the Arts Council, we're always looking for where projects might be additionally funded or new projects supported. And obviously that would have been the sole thing we'd have had to do if we hadn't got the MPO from Arts Council. So I guess we're looking at the fact that we have been able to secure that for the next 3 years. But yeah, just looking.
Do you get support with the fundraising? Do you pay a fundraiser, for example? Do you go through other sector support organisations for advice there, or is it all in?
No, it's all in house. We a lot of the team have years of experience of that anyway. If we're partnering with people, we'll obviously outsource partnerships, and we have contacts and networks that we can ask if we're unsure of things. We're lucky that we've got that sort of network, because obviously as a freelancer, individuals don't always have that, and you just sort of blindly doing things.
Do you get a lot of support from the local authority?
We'll see. We're due to find out soon. Yeah, they're doing, Calderdale are doing their own sort of year of culture for 2024 in line with Bradford's, yeah, which is fabulous, which means there's a bit of money available there up for grabs. So we are hoping to be part of that, and we're hoping to produce a lot of things for that. So we'll see, but certainly historically we have been supported, yeah, by the council.
Okay, lovely. Peter, throw that at you, your support networks.
Yeah, I guess in Sheffield, for me as an artist, it's the network of my studio group, but also my former studio group as well. It's like being in like WhatsApp groups. It's quite useful. There's always people around to talk about my work if I want to. I find that quite helpful. In terms of like what kind of support we offer, I've already talked about the editing suite, but we're also trying to we deliver a lot more workshops than we used to. So Site Galleries only had permanent participation staff for maybe like 2 years now. Previously it was all project to project, so it was always just assigned to do one specific thing, piece at a time. But now we're trying to build it into much more of a strategy. So like, for example, we do a lot more for the free school meals program, and school holidays we go out and deliver workshops in different community centres in Sheffield, which then means we're able to commission more artists to deliver workshops. So previously, from something that didn't exist at all to since 2021, we've commissioned 80 workshops in that time, and that's just one strand. That's just the holiday program, and then through the Explorers as well, we have 40 sessions a year. We deliver about half of them ourselves, and then we commission artists for the other 20. And then we have a skills-based program called New Tricks. So I'm just trying to increase as many possible strands as possible to commission artists, so we can have as many, at least 80 commissionable opportunities just through participation a year. That's my target. So I guess that's kind of what support we do. And then there's lots of and then we always benchmark what other people are paying in Sheffield and make sure that we're paying as much as we possibly can.
Yeah.
Because sometimes participation gets the short end of the stick, but we try and treat participation the same way we do with the gallery, and everything's to the same standard and rates of pay, obviously, as it should be.
I was trying to register for the What's Next Sheffield chapter, which was managed by the Creative Guild, which I then discovered no longer exists. Do you know what? Because the Creative Guild obviously was set up as a kind of peer-to-peer support, skill sharing, you know, that to provide all of this stuff that we're perhaps talking about, and that's I dare to say failed, but I don't know why it's closed.
It got a lot of money in its inception when there was a bit more money around to do something strategic for a specific period of time.
Right.
The aim was, with that seed funding, that it would become a sustainable model. But I was a member. I went to lots of stuff. It was always good to an extent. Yeah, mostly good, but it was quite expensive. So, you know, when we were saying before about trimming the fat, like if you're spending £20 a month just to be part of a peer group, it's quite a lot when you're already part of a studio group, and then it's also like Sheffield's quite a small place. Like I love like ceramicists and I love painters, but you know, as a filmmaker, sometimes you just want to speak to the people who like are actually closest to what you're making. You know, I would buy other people's work, but I couldn't. I'm not very good at giving people feedback on their paintings, or so like the limited number of. I think I know the people who make stuff similar to me in Sheffield and who would talk to about work. So like knowing everyone isn't actually that helpful.
So that's an interesting question. It's like how do you know what you need in terms of support? I mean, when I was running an MPO with artist development as part of that strand, we introduced a system that was devised in America, and it was pages and pages and pages long about every different aspect of your practice and where you would rate yourself, and it created these spidergrams. And then the idea being that, you know, a year or so later you go through the same process, because as an organization, managing the impact you're having on someone's practice is actually very difficult, because everyone's completely individual with their own life circumstances all impacting and all of that stuff. So this was a kind of way of doing it, and it is so complex being an artist, all the different skills that you need to maintain yourself, running as a business, or the branding, the marketing, the partnerships, the curating, the fundraising, the tax returns, and that's before you've made any work, really. So I'm wondering, you know, if you are in a studio, you've got that far, which is a big step to commit and invest in yourself in that way. You've got this studio group of artists. So then where does that next step up come from? You know, team at Dean Clough are obviously there for those conversations, but you might not be asking the right questions even. So where does all that? How do we make that happen for people?
Yeah, it's hard. I think that's what we try and do with our young people's program, is to try and get them to understand the arts ecology in Sheffield, and do through partnerships and collaborations and stuff, to understand all the different entry points that are willing to give young people a bit of a equity and a bit of a foothold in the city to like run a night, or you know, or do some art for an evening, or like have a meanwhile space, or just try and understand that stuff so they can kind of, because I don't think for young people coming through now, it's hard to say like why this life is like worth it.
Choose art.
Like, you know, yeah, like 36 next week, and I'm still renting. You know, it's like it's quite a stressful way to live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult, but I think if you get people excited, it helps.
Yeah.
I feel like they have a sense of belonging, and they have control and some opportunity to shape it and shape the culture.
Yeah.
Which is something we're developing as well at the moment. It's like with the Care Leavers Union, because there's 50 people in Sheffield leave care every year. You know, so that's quite a lot of young people. So it's seeing what we can do with getting them involved in projects and stuff.
Mel.
I just wanted to kind of go back to something Peter said, or I guess ask a little bit more about that, because when you were kind of prompting us to talk about support networks and this kind of idea, Peter, you said, you know, sometimes you just want to speak to people whose work is closest to yours. And what's interesting is the idea of, I think for lots of artists, the kind of main kind of network they're embedded in is, you know, the local network of artists around them, whether that's people in the city, whether it's like in a studio group, whether it's friends, whether it's like people you studied with. And those kinds of networks, knowing all of those people, like you said, it's not always the most helpful thing. I think it's helpful in some ways, in terms of like, you know, a sense of belonging or solidarity, or to kind of sustain a kind of momentum within a practice. But it's kind of an interesting idea that actually like those networks that we're most active and embedded in are not necessarily the most useful for what's at the core of our practice. They're good for kind of all the stuff around it, but not. So I just wondered whether we like could talk a little bit more about that. I think that's quite interesting.
Yeah, like I wish like the artist film weekender is coming up this week at Sharon, and I'll be going, and that's probably the closest thing to my practice, you know, and the things that not Rogue Studio, Paradise works, the nights and the way they program film in a more DIY way. That's like I haven't been able to find anything like that in Sheffield, really.
Do you know about the Artist Moving Image Network, actually?
No?
It's run by Pavilion. Let me find a link for you.
Thank you.
So this comes back to that kind of community of practice, isn't it? I guess that's why you get the social art network being quite successful, because you've got a group of practitioners who operate in collaborative ways with different community elements. So there's a kind of a methodology or an approach that is shared, even if the experiences and the outcomes are different.
So I'll put this link in here. I don't know how useful this is actually, because it says that they're focused on artists in West Yorkshire, but I don't know how. I'll give
them a follow anyway. It's good to know.
Kind of rigid. Will is who runs that, but it's also like an interesting model, I think, too. So could potentially be worth even just reaching out to Will at Pavilion just to have a chat about how that functions and how that, you know, in terms of like if it is something, you know, not saying that like, because this is the thing is like, oh, if we want some support, something, we have to set it up, and it's like, why is it not there already? But I don't know. Yeah. Just like maybe an interesting reference point, but also maybe not that helpful if it's not to you. But they mainly meet online, so yeah. And I think it could be interesting actually if they've been going for a little while to say, you know, there isn't something like you in my area. I'm not that far away from you. Would you consider expanding the group, you know, the geographical like cut off? It could be interesting.
They have a screening space as well. It's like,
yeah,
you know, there's like a purpose-built black box space with a projector in. Okay, this is really helpful. Thank you.
But that does raise a question if other people have very kind of specific forms of practice or interest or passions, you know, how far do you need to go for support? You know, we have this conversation quite a lot, don't we, Mel, about, you know, do you stimulate and kind of set things up, or are they better grown organically in terms of that type of support?
It's just all a minefield. If there's one thing I've learned, there's a massive gap in knowing what's out there and wanting to engage with people. Because the more networking I do and the more people I meet, I mean, I attended an event a couple of weeks ago in Halifax. I'm from Halifax, born and bred, been in arts my whole life, actively seek out opportunities, regular theatre goer, and I didn't know what the person next to me did, and they ran this amazing club at one of the churches, and I was just like, if I don't know about that, yeah, there's a massive issue here. Like, how are other people supposed to know if, you know, they're not engaged with the arts, or they don't live in Halifax, or and I'm just finding it more and more. The more that I'm learning, I'm going, oh my God, I wish I knew about this 10 years ago, or how no wonder you've not got engagement, because I didn't even know about this. And, you know, I just feel as the most, you know, you want to be hitting the people like me that are going, yes, I'll do it, absolutely, I'll come see it, or whatever, I'll be part of it. But if there's a gap there between me finding it, then anyone else who's got any sort of detachment has got no chance. And I don't even know how you go about bridging that.
Because you're kind of like a sector ambassador, isn't there? It's like a knowledge repository. So working in the arts and knowing how engagement is impossible, the more knowledge that comes through you can point people in the right place so much quicker and easier, and raise awareness and connect. I always find that the more you know about what's going on, the more you can connect people, just like you know, Mel and Peter there. It's like, well, there's that over there and you're looking for that. Why don't you two people talk, you know?
Yeah. Rachel's great at that. Rachel has 1 million contacts stored in her head. Ooh. And she knows the Lord Mayor of every town and the education head of whatever. She's just got this ability to bank and store, and it's a real talent, and it's just something you need in this sector as well. Like, it's insane. I don't even know how you do it, but you're really good at networking, Rachel. Have you got any tips on like how you go about it, or how you store that stuff?
But the biggest challenge is actually not about who you know, it's about how you connect people up. That's the biggest challenge. So you can know your local authorities, right? And even in your local authorities, they don't know everyone. And so, you know, you have to do a lot of like marrying around, trying to find people. And it's like, it's a bit like how you put a network together. So I've got contacts in local authorities, but I've also got contacts in, you know, people who, I don't know, I suppose ambassadors for COP27 or 26 or where it is now. And it's like, how can those sort of style of networks then map with the kind of like man on the ground? And so groups like YVAN is quite interesting, because you kind of come on the back of CVAN, which is like a more national institute or national network. And I didn't realize CVAN was a thing until I heard about YVAN. And I know Sue from Leeds Creative Time Bank that I've known for years, and it's how those past and historical contexts all kind of marry up, and that's how you find out. But in terms of a wider reach, it's like the biggest challenge is actually being able to put 2 and 2 together. And I think unless you know someone that's relevant to the time now, you can think back maybe 2 years to 3 years, oh, that would be such a good contact, but they not be the right contact anymore, because how fast the art network or the art climate changes. People change really rapidly in this industry. So it's a lot of chasing bullets, really.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of like half the job, isn't it? Is staying on top of who's doing what and who you need to talk to make things happen. But I do think I do think networks are quite remarkable. It's about social capital. Recently did some work, and I think it comes down to all the equity, diversity and inclusion work that we're trying to do, and we're also on a journey to become an anti-racist organisation, and some of that is about your social capital. Like, you can broadcast it to the world, but unless people's experience of you back that up, then it kind of falls empty a little bit. So it's, yeah, it's really interesting. On the back of the Beyond the Obvious too, which Glynis was talking about earlier, it's like recognition that, you know, there is a gap there as well to support artists from the global majority in our region. You know, there's a few things, but there's nothing to send people to point people out to get that kind of, yeah, peer support, I suppose. But then it's not right for us as an organisation to set that up either. You know, that's got to, you can try and create the space for it to happen, but yeah, networks are, much like Gloam, I suspect, require quite a lot of voluntary hours. People have to be
And on the back of that, also, like, I suppose with COVID, it's kind of inflamed these barriers to happen. Like, as much as social media has been really, really useful in connecting like networks that you wouldn't be used to being exposed to, but there's nothing better than the classic way, and that's going to things, meeting up, physically talking, having that interaction, and when you're in one part of the country to get to somewhere else, it's challenging, isn't it? So I think, you know, there's a bit of a disposition where it's getting those networks out there to someone who's not exposed to them, to then those networks then kind of maybe partnering and interchanging up a bit to then the person who's like organizing it and going, there's just so much.
Get burnout. It comes back to that burnout, doesn't it, when you're trying to solve the world's problems. So I'm kind of getting a sense that in terms of, you know, the impact that people are feeling from the climate crisis are perhaps not as immediately damaging, because particularly for the people in the room, you know, there's a resilience within those buildings, or there's already models that can accommodate some of that. And actually, I think the end of the winter, maybe in the spring, is when we'll see people having to make tough decisions, perhaps, about, I mean, I don't know about you, I'm on a fixed term contract for my energy until the summer, so I'm not feeling that just yet. And I don't have to remortgage for a couple of years, so I'm not feeling that yet, but it's there, it's coming, and I'm having to think about those things coming in the future. So maybe this is a slower burn than we're anticipating, that decision making people are having to do is going to be a little bit more delayed. Do you think that's fair?
Yeah, I think that's fair, because let's be like, it's not really been properly cold since the last week, has it? So I would say January, February, March are going to be like crucial as to how much energy we use, because they'll be the coldest months anyway. Yeah. I've also been talking to loads of creatives, in the sense, artists and people who work in sort of creative industries, and not all of them are homeowners, and they're not all of them have their own rent, like they rent everything. And it's more difficult whenever you don't own your own energy or your own energy box or anything, because you can't maybe make those executive decisions to then try and make your workspace or your home space more it's sustainable in that sense. And surprisingly, the people who are the homeowners and the people who own their own workspaces, because quite a lot of the time they actually have their own studio spaces at home, either it's a garage or whatever, and they're like, yeah, there's a loophole, there's loads of loopholes, you just take the box, send the box back, get your own, it's fine, you just send them what they need to hear. And you're like, okay. So this kind of like radicalization that then comes out of it. And which is quite an interesting concept in its own right, because it's like, why we have to do what we need to survive, but there's these, not everyone has their own house, and so that economical crisis, which we're all being affected by, is then polarizing people to what who are on maybe like a middle income, should I say, and there's support for that, but people who are maybe on a lower income, there's not so much as a result of the fact they do not own their own house.
Yeah, so you're beholden to external forces in a way. You don't have that level of control.
Yeah.
I do like that radical statement, because there is a philosophy or a school of thought that actually creativity peaks in times of crisis and stress, and actually when it's all comfortable and lovely, then no one's very inventive. So maybe we will see quite a lot of political activism coming out of the sector in the near future. Do you think that'll occur? I'd like to think it'll occur.
It's already occurring, you know, is that don't pay your bills. Which is also very dangerous because of the political, because of, I suppose, like the personal political impact it may have, because you don't want to go to war with an energy company, do you? So it's a delicate one from Radicalised, because I think you can join a group online, sign a newsletter from the 1st of December, don't pay your bills for a month, and that's maybe like up to 500,000 maybe. Whether people actually do that or not is a different story, because that then it kind of creates this dissonance then between people who are on a lower income and can't really support, and maybe have families and responsibilities, and they're not just creatives, they're people who they're just working class. And so it's like, at what point do these radical groups become helpful or maybe problematic in the future?
Yeah, I agree with that, because I thought, because I've been in trouble with, you know, being behind with and they don't let up if you're behind with your bills, so you still have to pay it, and it's whether you want to be taken to court to pay it and then have extra court costs on top. So I think it's about working out with the energy companies, because I'm with Ecotricity, which is a green company, but they're not the cheapest company necessarily, but they have several tariffs. So I did spend a long time, and I actually got some money back off them, because my meter went faulty during the lockdown, and it meant 9 months I wasn't charged. So I kept saying to them, come and sort it out, because I don't want to get a massive bill. And they did in the end. And then I still ended up with a bill of it was 300 quid, I think. And I actually said to them, because of the trouble that I've gone through, I want a discount. And actually, I think a lot of people had trouble as well at that time, because you couldn't get a call out, you know. So if the electricity was still on, it never went off. So if it had gone off, then they would have sent someone out. Because it didn't go off, they didn't see it as an emergency. And that was another thing that was quite, so there was something wrong with it, which meant I was being and they were estimating how much I owed. So I said, because you couldn't read the meter, it was estimated, could you give me a discount? I didn't expect them to write off the whole amount, but I said, can you? And they gave me a discount of 1/3 off. So I asked people about it, and they said, yes, accept it, you know. So I didn't pay the full amount, but they have got millions of tariffs. So it is worth looking at the tariffs and trying to, because for instance, you pay a standing charge and you pay for the bill, the amount of electricity or energy you're using. So some of them had higher standing charges and lower, and they were trying to push me onto one that was lower, but had a higher standing charge every day. So you're paying 50p a day for just to have the meter in the house. And so it's worth looking at the different tariffs that they offer, and maybe a campaign, if there is a campaign, is to get the energy companies to do a really cheap tariff for people that are on really low incomes. And like the government's doing, it's taxing the higher earners. Why don't they, the energy companies offer a really economic rate for people that are on really low incomes, and be sensitive to that, because they do make loads of money. There's no question about it.
Yeah, I agree.
And for arts organisations or charities, I think they should be doing stuff as well. So if any arts organisations,
you do get reduced. You get reduced VAT.
Yeah.
So you can. I think it's 5%. I can't remember.
The other thing is
Okay.
there's the discounts if you're on universal credit. Again, they're a bit hard to understand. It might be worth doing a workshop on how to get those discounts, or how to, you know, because you go onto the government website and you just go, oh my God, you know, you have to fill out tons of information, and that would help if there was some sort of grassroots sort of pushing for more discounts for people, you know, from the energy companies, and actually target the big energy companies, you know, like, you know, target them for the onslaught of, you should be, you know, helping people out, not squeezing people dry.
They don't care. There's those politicians.
They don't. But, you know, if there is this thing about the promise of not getting any money, and everybody does it. You see, the thing is, everybody has to do it or nobody. Because a lot of people get their bills paid by direct debits. So the richer people just set up direct debits. I never set up direct debits. I set up standing orders, or I pay when I get the bill. I insisted that Ecotricity sent me a bill because they wanted me to do dual fuel. So you pay your gas and electric together as one. And I said, no, I want them separate. I want electricity separate and the gas separate, so that, because I have discounts on the electricity, but I don't on the gas.
Right.
So you can swap the money. So if you're in credit in one, you can actually move the money over, well, possibly to the other account. But it is important to get it set up so you're knowing exactly how much you're paying, rather than just a you know, because the dual fuel might be cheaper, or they might present it as cheaper, but it's not necessarily. And also, if you decide not to use your gas, you can then focus on just using the electric rather than using both, you know. I'm thinking of also writing to my landlord, because I'm in a rented house which is managed by a management company. So I'm thinking of writing to both, because I have the address of the owner, or getting my housing management company to write to the owner to look at spending some money on the house, to make it more energy efficient.
It's very topical, you know, that is in the news, isn't it, of late, the quality of the rented sector, and that it's not up to scratch. Okay, just looking at the clock. So I have one more question, but I kind of think we've probably covered it, generally speaking. It was more about projecting into the future, really, and what the likely outcome is going to be in the next 6 to 12 months. But I wonder if it's perhaps more useful to have a look at part of the rationale for this is the event on Monday that the Civic University Network and Culture Forum North are holding in Sheffield at the old post office, the Cultural Partnerships Transforming Lives, which is being attended by Darren Henley from the Arts Council, Oliver Coppard, Mayor of South Yorkshire, Professor Chris Husbands from Sheffield Hallam, Angela Fuchs, Chief Exec at Sheffield College, Sonia Gale, Vice Chair of the African Heritage Culture Forum, which I wasn't aware existed, Professor Vanessa Toomlin, Director of City of Culture Partnerships, Duncan Robertshaw, Chief Executive of Darts, and Martin McCurvey, Chair of Sheffield Property Associations and Deputy Chair of Sheffield Culture Collective. And there is an opportunity there. I don't know if anyone else from this group is going. I'm booked on to go, but there's an opportunity to kind of present the partnership way forward of how some of these organisations and institutions can offer that support that we've just been talking about to cultural organisations, or indeed individuals, to make sure that the sector remains sustainable. So I think it's perhaps more advantageous to have a little exploration of that, really. I don't know if the Site Gallery have a relationship with Sheffield Hallam.
Yeah, we do.
Is that equitably balanced in the power sharing?
Just noticed that this is a recorded conversation, so I'll just give you a thumbs up.
Okay, good. So is there perhaps something more that you feel Sheffield Hallam could do, or indeed Sheffield University could do, knowing, for example, that you're offering 3 computer fully equipped with subscribed tech for artists for free? And there is it A to A or A for A that are based, I think they're based in Sheffield, but they are about providing access to facilities in higher education for cultural organisations. But I'm not aware of anyone that's made good use of that scheme personally. It's not come through to me. I mean, apart from the fact that universities will be as cash strapped as everybody else because they have an inordinate amount of buildings to heat, and are probably cutting courses left, right and centre and reducing their staffing. So
yeah, I mean, I worked as a associate lecturer at Hallam on a 0-hour contract for a while, and tried to balance that with working at site, so I did half and half, but it was pretty horrendous, really.
Is that because it was 0 hour, or just because they expect you to do lots of the supporting work around delivery for free?
Yeah, so you'd be paid, because the pay looks great on paper, it's £42 an hour, but then if you're teaching a session for 2 hours, that includes all your prep time as well. So if I was to teach 2 hours on film, I would probably spend like 2 days preparing the session. So you're doing 2 days and 2 hours teaching for £84. So
yeah,
it didn't work out good value.
Yeah, not for quality teaching at any rate.
No, but all those we don't have a budget line at site for skills-based workshops, but all the ones that developed in that time for Hallam teachers one-off skills sessions at site.
Right.
So I try and reuse what I invested in.
Yeah. So do they give you hard cash, or is it in-kind support?
Oh, Hallam?
Yeah.
No, they don't give us anything like that. We just used to run a lecture series in partnership, transmission.
Oh yeah.
But they run it with Arts Catalyst now.
Right. Okay. Does anyone else have a really good sort of partnership with an HEI? No?
We're working with WISE.
Oh yes, you are, aren't you?
Of course. And again, they're doing well.
Do you want to just explain what the acronym stands for?
Oh yeah, Wilberforce Institute for Slavery and Emancipation. They're refurbishing Wilberforce House, which is a museum, and they've got together a group of advisory group, and there really isn't any money in it really, but we put, well, I actually brought up the fact that you can, even if it's an advisory group, because they do this a lot, they get a group of volunteers who are knowledgeable about a subject, and then they get you together and pick your brains basically, and they don't pay you, they just give you expenses, but you can actually give people a small stipend every time you go to a meeting, because the meetings are 3 hours long, and the most they can give really is 50 quid, but only if you attend 3 meetings, and these meetings are going all the way on to March. So I am deciding at the moment whether I want to is it worth my time doing this, because there are some people on it who are retired and they've got independent income. The other 2 are PhD students, and there's some other people who are from Hull, from the Afro-Caribbean, and I haven't talked to them yet, but you know, this is a common problem, getting these advice groups to do the museum's work for them. They have employed a curator from York and they're using their own creators as well. But we're basically citizen advisors. And I think, yeah, I'm thinking, you know, those sorts of things need to be challenged in a sense. Because, you know, they just want to get you in for a few hours and not really.
It feels exploitative.
It feels exploitative, yeah. So it's not a proper job. You haven't got a contract, and I'm still waiting for them to say what they've actually offered us in writing as well. So that's another thing. Yeah. So I've just looked up the AA2A. There is an AA2A schemes in York and Sunderland. And I don't know where else, but that's 22 to 23. So I should imagine they've got their artists there already. And there's Blackpool, Central Lancaster, Chester, Staffordshire, Derby, Loughborough, Birmingham, and Anglia Ruskin, Bedfordshire, and Buckinghamshire. So those are the ones
areas,
for 23. There is a website and there is a map where they all are. So I don't know if that's going to continue into 23, 24.
Yeah, they've had MPO funding, so yeah, they'll.
So that might be an option, because you do get some money if you get a resident. You have to apply, and then we had some at Hull College as well, Hull School of Art and Design. And it's not very much money though, but you do get a space. So maybe you should look for the warmest place to
I think
university to do it.
I think that's where I'm coming at. You know, the university they generally have lots of buildings. I mean, I know there are access and security issues and all sorts of things, but you know, is there a way they can support the sector, even if it's just free meeting spaces? You know, we talk about that peer support and that resilience and those networks. Is that a way that they could potentially keep us going, if you like? It might be, you know, those warm spaces for desk-based work that isn't messy and welding and throwing paint around the room, but you know, even if it was within specific timeframes, that might be something that would be of use.
Yeah, I have considered sort of getting a space, certainly for some of the stuff I was doing at Shawthorne House, actually, because that was about an archive of Black history, and there is some at the university already from the bicentenary of the abolition of slavery as well. So I was thinking, if I could get a free room, that would make it worth having an association with that would be available to, you know, to anyone who wants to do a bit of research, but isn't a member of the university, you know, isn't a student, isn't a member of staff, to have a sort of connection to using some of their resources, and maybe look at, maybe Hull has little bits of funding, you know, like 300 quid, 200, you know, those sorts of amounts that could be offered as a sort of for heating and lighting, I don't know. And
I think, would you not agree though, Glynis, that as a practicing artist, to have a tenuous association with the university can be advantageous in terms of your profile?
Yeah, I think it's worth it in a sense that it gives them a different perspective, you know, it gives them access to different people that they might not, because not all universities have big art departments, for instance, and you could look at a collaboration between one that does, you know, even if it does science or law or any other subject that might connect and give them ideas. I mean, be creative. This is what you said about being in and actually maybe go in. I mean, we did have a project at Hull, the architecture students. One of their projects was to look at the sustainability of the building of Hull School of Art and Design, and to look at creating a sustainable building, which never got done, of course, because, you know, the cost, but it might be worth having artists that are investigating topics that the university is looking at. in terms of its costs and how an artist can help them save costs. I mean, that might be a good headline. Artist saves university from closure because someone designed a product or gave them ideas that, you know, that saved them lots of money. So I don't know, but you know, certainly it's tricky getting into, you know, having a relationship, because I've tried to get a relationship, but it is about building a relationship. You have to build a relationship with particular people,
Yeah.
and then have an idea of what you're going to do, what you're going to. I mean, there is someone here who has managed to get it because she did a big project with them. So it's having a project idea in mind, and then.
I wonder, Les, you've just been talking to students. That implies you work for an academic institution. Do you have knowledge of how such places can be supportive to the cultural sector?
Knowledge of how they can be supportive, yeah. So I work for the Open College of the Arts. So we are teeny tiny, but we're super flexible, and joined up with the OU soon, fully joined up with the OU soon. So, you know, we're used to working like this with people, I guess. So those kinds of, you know, departments and things like that, we don't particularly have stuff like that. There's no, you know, there's a very small office in Barnsley running the whole thing, even though it's worldwide. Yeah, and within ours, because we don't have, it's not wealthy at all, but there's always been plans to try to have something in particular to give back, even though we've only got this small base in Barnsley, is to give something back to that place and to try to do stuff in South Yorkshire, but it's still quite hard. I mean, we don't have the capacity. No one has any spare time or space, and that, you know, that in bricks and mortar places, we know how that works as well, because everything's front loaded onto the tutors and the lecturers, isn't it? And actually it does turn out that there's people in marketing and we've got bags of time to do all sorts of stuff that they could be using to, you know, take it back to that value thing as well. You know, I've caught the end of what Glynis is saying there, and it's like the value's untapped, isn't it? In so many areas, from so many things. You know, you've got super experts out there, sometimes within your student body as well. I mean, we're lucky we have easily half to maybe 2/3 are people already with a career. They're not coming to get, you know, I'm in photography. They're not coming to get a photography degree usually to change careers. Usually doing it because because neoliberalism destroys your soul, and they're trying to fill the void. But there's something missing from life, and they've realised that just earning and maybe even having a career has not done it. You know, it's something else, and like acquiring extra knowledge and you know, putting it into practice through some sort of expression is worthwhile. Sorry, I've gone off the point slightly, but yeah, I think somehow it's not joined up, is it? That you know, it's practice informed teaching what I'm doing. So I'll talk literally, you know, I showed you that earlier. I would show that to a student just now, just to say, blah, 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 because this was the experience here. I think that's sometimes missing because of the silly bean counting pressure that they're under in bricks and mortar to kind of do that. And I wonder if the A2A thing is sometimes about, like, you know, trying to get value from their actual physical assets almost, you know, to prove the value. You know, it's really good hearing what Peter was saying about site earlier, about how, you know, there's unrealized stuff as well, isn't there, in these places that could be open to, particularly to us freelancers, because we've got now, you know, and when I haven't been, you know, with a commission or paid and stuff, sometimes I've been doing stuff 3 to 4 years, where just having somebody who had Photoshop on a machine would have been really useful. And you'd be exploiting maybe friendships, tenuous acquaintances to get some of these skills and stuff. But actually, it's and hasn't this always been the case, that whatever networks we tend to set up, we never seem to get, because it's an individual need I'll have at a specific time. But wouldn't it be great if it was just, you know, that time banking thing that people try to do, rather than put any kind of, again, neoliberal onus on it, just let us have it, like UBI, just you know. So that's wonderful to hear that, but it's still a bit too far away from me. It's still like half an hour on train, but it could be. I mean, like if it was, you know, if I thought about it for a day, hang on, I could do all the shots. That might be worthwhile, you know. But likewise, what would also be great, wouldn't it be, to be link up with an expert? Other people are better at treating my pictures than I am.
Yeah.
You know? Same could go for print. Same could go for all these kind of areas.
But it's interesting what you're saying, because it's like, you know, going back to that whole planning your making and your creativity around studio access and temperatures, and you know, knowing that over the winter you're going to be at home less than in the studio, and actually your project, and changing what you work with, what it is you're making in accordance with all of those things that are available to you in response, if you like, to your environment. But to then kind of go, I just need 2 days with Photoshop. I don't need to pay Adobe a monthly subscription fee. You know, I just need it for 2 days or a week or something. And kind of going, you know, I can go and approach this place and I can go there and do that. Brilliant. Because it is access to facilities. It's like, how do you know that you need to invest in Adobe if you haven't got the opportunity to see if it's what you need?
It used to be much easier to steal it.
Yeah. But then you've got ethics in there as a creative. You know, someone's designed and made and built. And I know
they've got enough money.
But it's like stealing music, isn't it? It's like when people.
I think they've been paid already.
Oh yeah, music definitely.
You know.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like I'm asking for free stuff, and I sort of am in a way. But I don't know. I just think about, because I had a chat with my mate, you know, who designs stuff. You know, so he knows. So yes, I've done a little bit of graphic design. I could put together a booklet and stuff, but he'd do it really well. But he mentioned about how he just goes, "Oh, thanks for that," because, you know, someone I introduced him to 3 years ago, you know, has asked him to do another little bit of work, and so it's a bit more work, and he got work then from that original introduction. He's got that. It's not like we would do nothing with this thing, you know, if we got together and you use somebody's free stuff and there's someone sat next to you and what are you working on?
There's always
the informal network would start from there, which could only benefit, would benefit others as well. It isn't just, you know, us tapping for free stuff. There's always going to be people who tap for free stuff, isn't there? But to be honest, they've probably got everything now, haven't they? Like Peter says, they've nicked it. So
I just think for especially like digital creatives, there's every like cycle, like there's been a new cycle where like computers in the past few years need to be a bit more powerful, and cameras have just suddenly leaped. In the past like 2 years, it flipped, and computers just got 4 times better than they were a few years ago. So it's like, it's not only is it a time when everyone's struggling, but it's a time when everyone needs a bit more power. That's like, as in like computer power.
My printer's 17 years old now, and I don't know what will happen. It's, you know, so it's large format, so it's quite big. It can do 60 centimeters wide. I don't know what's going to happen. It's way past what Epson would even suggest, and you can only do certain size prints because, like, the computing in it is. Well, even my kids have got, you know, their stuff is like more sophisticated. But it's like, yeah, what am I going to do? Yeah, when that runs out, you know, because we're not talking like old school, you know, photographic printing. This is a digital printer, but actually it's out of date, really. You know, and we're going to need this. We're going to need this collective thing. If there's that many artists, that's incredible, isn't it? Those numbers you gave at the start.
Yeah.
You know, not many of us have got that outside income so that we can just produce our own work, which I can just about do at the moment. But, you know, as Peter says, computing power and even camera, like now it's, what's that now? That's 7 years old now. So that's, you know, I'm starting to fall behind with that.
Rachel, you mentioned knowing Sue from the Time Bank in Leeds. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because that's been running for a while now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I joined back in 2017 now, actually, through Zoe Parker and Lucy Meredith, who are all into Connect with Climate, well, CAL, Climate Action Leads. And I met Sue because during the lockdown, we were trying to find out ways to try and get some online workshops out on social media to try and get more attraction for people to come and work with people from disabled backgrounds, basically. And Sue was really, really helpful. And yeah, the time bank is interesting because it's like you can exchange your time with your skills. So let's say you sign up as like a member, and you could be from whatever background you want. You could just be a handyman that likes to do plumbing, so it doesn't really matter. And what they do is that if you put a request in through that website, then you can say that, like, I've got this. It could be things like, I need to insulate my home. How do I go about doing this? And then they can put you into contact with someone who already may work in insulation or knows people who might provide the materials, or someone who I just need a hand. And what you do is that you amount your time up. So whenever you exchange your time, you would then, it's per hour. So you can, there's no limit to your time, but it's only if you're available to help exchange your skills or not. And also if you just want to do a good thing. And it's a really good way to sort of meet people, especially around Leeds. I'm pretty sure the time bank is a national thing. Each, I suppose, area in the country will have their own time bank, but it depends how popular it is. So it's worth checking it out. It is a national thing. I can get the website for you and you can have a wee look now.
Yeah, Hull's got a good one, and it's connected to the Hull Food Partnership and a lot of other mutual aid, because it's basically mutual aid. So it's connected to a lot of mutual aid organisations, which is not about money necessarily. It's about giving skills, sharing skills, giving you time and getting time back and building up credits. You can build up credits. So if you needed, say, 3 hours of Photoshop tuition, you could then pay that person your 3 hours, and then they've got 3 extra hours as well. So it's a good, and they often organise socials. And the one in Hull has moved to a really inaccessible place, I must admit, which is inaccessible by bus. So you've got to have a car to get there, really. But the idea of it is really good, and it is connected to a lot of other organisations. So you've got that sort of wider network of, and it's connected to climate issues as well, because they're very passionate about climate change as well.
Do you think it's that I mean, I guess what I'm going back to is asking institutions to give you stuff for free, whereas actually they're much more inclined, I would suspect, if they could see some of exchange. So having a kind of time bank model with a university and its local cultural networks, or whatever, however we describe it, in terms of, well, if you can provide a room for 2 hours for our meeting, then someone will come and sit on an advisory board for X amount of time. And, you've got, we'll support a student doing X, Y, and Z if they come and babysit for me, or, whatever it is. It's a kind of different, it's the exchange model that I think is interesting. Because universities are businesses. They're not going to just constantly bleed stuff out without it having some benefit, I would argue.
Well, it might be worth looking at their volunteering opportunities, I suppose, because if you don't work, you're volunteering, and see if there is some way where you can. But again, it would be building a relationship with a particular department you want to have access to, maybe. I mean, in Hull, the public libraries actually are quite good in providing. There's a library in most bits of Hull. And in the central library, there is a makerspace upstairs, and that has, well, it has everything from 3D printing to printing large format as well. It has a printer. I don't know how up to date they keep them, because again, they're dependent on funding as well. But they do have Photoshop, and they do have. So if anyone's in Hull, you can do that. I don't know if in Leeds libraries have similar facilities. But to be a member of Makerspace, I think it's £10 a month if you're unemployed. So, or you're not, you know, it's 20, they do a £20 a month if you're funded or if you've got money, and £10. And then I don't know if you pay for some of the resources, so say like the paper you use, it's quite cheap though. It's because it's subsidized, and there are technicians there to help you do things. And they do have Photoshop and all those programs as well. So, but
yeah,
you just have
I mean,
to.
I guess I'm thinking again, it comes down to you only need it for 2 days. I don't want a year's subscription. Can you pay by the month? Can you pay by the?
Yeah, you can pay by months, you see. So if you've got a project you want to do and you need to use the makerspace, so like every day for 2 weeks, or for well, you'd probably just use it for a month. So it would really focus the fact that you have to sort of, you know, be in every day and use the space and use the time for the money. But I think that's quite
With Adobe logins now, you can use 2 computers on it at the same time, but you can have multiple email addresses connected to the account. You just have to kick the person off who's using it, but you can do that quite easily. So multiple people could share an Adobe login, like 2 could share it easily with no problems whatsoever. But like you could probably have 4 people if you said, like, if you chose which days you needed to do stuff, or you had like a WhatsApp group, like, oh, is it available now? Can I use it?
Yeah,
I think that would probably be like a good. You shouldn't use it that way. I tell you not to, but you can. Like, we only have half the number of licenses we need at site because we know that it works on 2 machines at once.
Oh, that's good. Yeah, the college used to do that. They used to buy in multiple licenses. It had a certain number, and then certain number of students could all be using Photoshop at the same time. But yeah, there were a few people that found loopholes about it and copied some of the programs as well. Especially because also sometimes you find, like, the music college will have music software, the film and photography people will have different software, and there's not really an exchange. So we said we wanted things like Cubase and Logic, and we had to get them. And so the technicians who controlled the licenses in the music department had to liaise with the art department. So that was something that was quite an eye-opener about the fact you had to have licenses. Now, I don't know if students now are expected to pay monthly for, you know, borrowing the program, because that seems to be the issue. I was speaking to someone the other day and they said, because it's going up, the rental of these programs is going up as well. That's one of the, you don't buy a Photoshop anymore, do you? You just rent. You rent it.
You subscribe, don't you?
Subscribe. So yeah, and I think it would be good to push to have maybe the facilities. I mean, the facilities in the college were underused sometimes, you know, and you had big rooms of computers, and it was a bit like, how do you get people in? Because it's the way everything is set up. So they can't actually allow access because of certain restrictions. So it might be good to look at ways around that, so that universities can
having somebody in the organisation willing to find a solution instead of just going, oh, it can't be done, which is what we normally get because of capacity issues as much as anything.
Yeah.
I'm aware we've got 9 minutes left. I just wonder if I went through everybody, if there was anything else that you would like to say or sum up that hasn't been said, or you think are the most important things, that would be quite useful for us. Lydia, you're first on my list.
Yeah, I don't really know what else I'd say. I've just sort of been bouncing off what other people have said. So
has it been useful? You know, do you think maybe in 3 months' time it's worth revisiting some of this stuff and seeing if, not that we've made any predictions, but you know, these issues aren't going away anytime soon, are they?
They're not, no. I mean, it's been nice to sort of get together and share some sort of ideas. But yeah, I'm not sure what we'll take away and use moving forward.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Glynis.
I just think the issue of shared resources maybe, and ideally it would be lovely to have a purpose-built building that is just for, you know, that just has everything artists need, and it's an environmentally friendly building in every city, and maybe looking at other things like what's happening in the building sector, what's happening in the alternative energy sector, and see, and there is also this notion of community assets and buying a place communally. So that might be something for the future, a sort of communal fund where everybody puts in a certain amount, and then you actually have a resource that can be shared by everyone in that region. There are some, I've been going on this, there's a TV station that's run by, community TV station that's run by Friends of the Earth, and it's down in Chester, and there's a lot of initiatives in Chester which are both about business and sustainability and the arts as well. So it might be worth looking at them, because they have the Friends of the Earth. I am a member of Friends of the Earth as well, so I look at what they're doing. And there's also there's a company called Build It, which I almost went to their conference. They're based in Swindon, I think, or somewhere like that, and they have all the materials that you can get for building your own building. And I'm quite interested in, because if you're an artist, you look at, well, where can I do my work apart from moving somewhere warmer, you know? And that's another option as well, having residencies outside of Britain in somewhere like the Caribbean, or Malta.
Let's all go there.
Or Malta, because Malta is got quite a connection to Hull. Again, it's warm. It's in the, I don't know where it is actually. I haven't been there. But, you know, like looking at other places so that people can have a respite from the cold Britain that we live in, you know.
Thank you, Glynis.
So
We all want a holiday.
People to buy a building outside of Britain as well.
Les, coming to you.
Sorry, I was unmuted, and sorry, I've missed the big chunk. I came back in when you were talking about a meeting or something, possibly in Sheffield with Hallam and people.
Yeah,
like
so the Civic University Network and Culture Forum North are holding a meeting about cultural partnerships on Monday with a whole host of significant VAP people to look at how HEIs and similar institutions can work in partnership with the cultural sector in face of the sort of cost of living crisis and resilience.
I think I'll just that's what I mean. I can't go to that, but like just a voice for freelancers, because we're so disparate and we want so many different things, and we're just individuals. But it sounds like there's thousands of us. We never get a voice. They've got stuff. You know, if Duncan's going there, he's got a building there.
Yeah.
You know, they shouldn't be trying to. I know entrepreneurialness is what we're all supposed to do, but like they've got the stuff. You know, and wouldn't it just be great if they could just go, instead of the partnership thing, you know, with this, you know, we have to organise ourselves into a community. No, just nothing, just blanket. Sorry, I'll just get all UBI and just think like, just let them come and let them have the thing. You know, as Glynis says, build the building. You know, it's warm. But I'm saying that, say for example, in Doncaster, there is that building. There it is. You know, and I would hardly use it as well. I'm not going to like squat.
Which building you're talking about?
The Point.
Oh yeah.
So they've got that, you know, and then there must be loads of equivalents with you know, the university buildings and stuff like that in Sheffield, plus other community places, plus all what we've got across Yorkshire and Humber. And it's just that we're so rarely heard, you know, and if we don't, you know, because sometimes again with the same thing about just needing to make money, or with having kids, you can't attend their open evening where we can show off. Not even that, just a way of letting us know that we could have, I guess, free stuff. But as you were saying then, that could be couched with, we've been doing this quite a long time now, a lot of us. We've got loads of things that we could offer in exchange in that time bank model without having to sign up for things or whatever. Just you know, just help us out, I suppose. You know, treat us as like a not even a group, because I don't want to say that because we're individuals.
No,
but just
yeah,
some people
assets.
that
We
need the
are
help.
all assets. We all have our own knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, and universities are about creating knowledge. They've got banks and banks of students that they're looking to enhance their and find a unique perspective that's going to give all their students the edge over another university, because their business is knowledge. And we're a bank of freelancers, creatives that have had to do X, Y, and Z to get here. We just want to use that for a few hours. We'll talk to your student for an hour, you know?
Yeah. I mean, things like that seem like a no-brainer, don't they? Because like, you know, they're quite often seen as like these very precious sort of VL gigs. But actually it'd be just quite nice to just, because you're a freelance as well. I mean, like it definitely exacerbated with the thingy. I didn't mind it so much, but it reminds you that you're very much on your own. No one gets to hear about your project unless you actually directly take it to them, apart from the people that you worked with, who it had immense value to. And you know, but it was in a, you know, in a pit village that no one ever goes to.
Which goes back to what Lydia was saying about the person next door that's been doing something for 20 years and you didn't know about it.
Absolutely,
You know, it's that same principle, isn't it?
Yeah.
Lovely. Rachel.
Can you repeat the question? Because there's been so much information that's just been released out. I'm just like, what's the question again?
It's just what you're taking away, or what you think the key element is out of the conversations we've had today, bearing in mind that I am attending this event on Monday, but that's not the be all and end all, or if there's something else that warrants further poking, really.
We've talked about, you know, assets and like how we are assets and how people have different organizations have different types of assets, but we really like talking about be all and end all as networks, and it's being exposed to those networks, and it's like, what's the best way to kind of go around finding those networks and how to really establish them, not just per area or per council or local authority, but, you know, how do we, you know, for example, Sheffield, how would someone from Calderdale be able to do sort of like bridge and kind of have like that sort of interaction, really? How, I suppose, like, you know, YVAN, your research report was very, very very thorough. And it's again, it's like, if you're not familiar with that report, it's, you know, what sort of bite-sized actionable resources can come at the back of that, that individuals and like freelancers can come away like, oh yeah, I could probably use and seeing this person or finding out from this person, that sort of thing. So that's all I don't really have much else to say apart from that.
No, well, I think it's important, you know, we are keen to understand how the ecology of all the different networks are growing, changing, impacting, how they react, respond, you know, what's missing, what's not missing, for all sorts of different reasons. But then you end up being conflicted with digital poverty in places, is something Glynis talks about in Hull particularly, and, you know, access to even this forum isn't easy for some people for 1,000 different reasons as well. So yeah, there's challenges everywhere you look, aren't there, and how best to be all things to all people.
Yeah, and in terms of, like, I suppose the distribution of resources, like, I know all freelancers are all independent artists and creators and creative-minded people, and it's like, what knowledge can we bestow? Or, you know, like, for example, I have a workshop in the Calder Valley. It's wet and it's cold, but it's a still full working workshop with access to tools and stuff. And I suppose, you know, it's like, if someone wanted to come to the Calder Valley and do some work, there's a space there that they could utilize, you know, for free. And just putting that out there. So if you need anything, come my way.
There's interest in the Art House actually have launched their Studios of Sanctuary, which I thought was a really interesting concept, that, you know, the City of Sanctuary system have endorsed their Studios of Sanctuary. So there's this idea of working with asylum seekers and refugees to give them working space. So that Just throwing that in there as well. It's kind of interesting in terms of time banking and sharing. Thank you, Rachel. Peter.
I don't know. Just thinking about lots of different things. Like often when I come out of things like this, I feel really mobilized to suddenly organize like lots of different free things for artists. But then the thing that I always do is I always make that possible because I end up delivering it myself, which doesn't actually change any long-term thing. You know, it's like I actually need to be a bit more strategic, and I need to go away and think about how I can get some money to give some more money away. How can I get it in to give it away?
I think the money is essential, but I think, you know, if we're all Arts Council connected in somehow, there's all this data and evidence and information that is required as well. And I think one of the things with YVAN, it was like, yes, we give information away upwards. So we send information to CVAN and to the Arts Council and to whoever, stakeholders. But what doesn't happen is how the impact of that information makes a change. And it's got to come back. You know, it shouldn't be this one-way thing. It's got to come back round to be interrogated and investigated and tested. So that's kind of what we try and do, is to take all that learning. Yes, it gets distilled into something unrecognizable, but then you've got to communicate what that's done. So, you know, if people are generating data and information, specifically around networks and sort of equity and diversity, then, you know, we'd be very interested in collating that, if you like, as a region, and keeping everybody in that loop and sharing it. And deciding what information we need, actually, instead of it being determined by external forces. So what is the research we need to do as a sector? You know, who is deciding that? I think is a kind of interesting question in itself.
Great.
Thank you. Mel.
Hello, sorry if my Zoom cuts out again.
Okay.
Looking at this link you posted, Glynis. I guess a takeaway for me is just some more thinking about networks. But I'm kind of considering networks as like a key ingredient of artist practice, not something that is kind of surrounding artist practice to kind of support it, but actually that it's intrinsic to it. But it's almost like there's potentially an ecology of different networks that an artist practice needs to be fully sustained and supported. So I guess I'm thinking about that, because we've talked about different kinds of challenges and support that are, you know, spatial, physical, technical, but also kind of pastoral. Like there's but I guess the other thing that, just to kind of bring back the focus of this session, thinking about, you know, the challenge posed by the cost of living, I think it's very real that there is some kind of immediate kind of challenges right here. But what's interesting is that actually everything that we've talked about, none of those challenges are anything new. And I'm just kind of, I guess it's tricky because, I mean, like a lot of people here probably, I've attended a lot of these different kinds of sessions and groups and forums and workshops, and you know, and it's all focused on identifying problems and then seeking, you know, problem solving strategies. And it's really hard to escape this like cycle of talking about the same challenges that kind of repeat over time. So I'm kind of thinking about why those things are repeating, whether it's like, you know, models of studio spaces, whether it's funding, whether it's acceptance of a lack of provision for, you know, the like freelancers in the career. I'm like thinking about how to kind of disrupt those cycles, but I don't know. But that's what, for me, this is kind of prompting me to think about a little bit more.
Bit of radicalization.
I don't think radicalization is the way, though. Also, I think because that comes with its own set of challenges, and whether that's, you know, politically, accessibility, that I think it needs to be something that doesn't just aim to disrupt. I don't think disrupt is always, I think, you know, it's something to kind of interrupt or disrupt that with an aim for finding a solution, not just to kind of, yeah, kind of mess things for
break
it. I don't think that works. I think it's about, when you open that space up, what can you do with that? You know, when you break that pattern, when you disrupt that, how do you then use that moment to kind of find some problem solving strategies? But I don't know. But yeah.
Thank you for that. Sarah, just coming to you, is there anything you feel you need to say at this point?
Well, yeah, there's a lot of information to take in, and it's been really interesting hearing from everyone. I think for me, it's the time bank thing that's I'll take away from this, and about finding better ways to share resources with other people, like sharing my own skills with others, and then maybe using the time bank to get some resources that I need or skills that I need. It's been, yeah, I think, yeah, the practical solutions like that are really helpful.
Brilliant. Well, I'm aware we're 10 minutes over time. So just to say thank you so much, and we will follow up with an email with this all summarised into a very short and neat document for you with some bullet points. Yeah, thank you very much indeed, and I hope to meet you all very soon.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.